Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson recently put up a video of himself doing Bulgarian split squats. And per usual nowadays, the internet lost its f***ing shit over his technique. Let's talk about it. So in a moment, I'm gonna take you in the gym. I'm gonna go over some foot positioning and some Bulgarian split squat details that are gonna make it easier for you and more effective. But first, let's just go over what The Rock is doing here. In this video, you're gonna notice first and foremost, he has his foot on a roller. Again, I'm gonna show you how to do this if you don't have a roller in a minute. But he has his foot on a roller and he has very little weight on his back foot. This is super important. If you put too much weight on your back foot, you're not gonna be working the front leg as much as you should. And when you're working a Bulgarian split squat, you want to focus on the front leg. The other thing that's very noticeable here is he has a very wide stance, and everyone on the internet is making a whole big deal out of it, saying that it's wrong and you shouldn't do it this way. It's not wrong and it's not bad, it's a different variation. And I'm gonna explain the details of this and who should do it, who shouldn't do it, and which variations are good for which people. But I just wanna make sure you know from the very beginning, just because his stance is really wide doesn't mean it's bad, it's just he's targeting a different muscle group. Now, before we get into the different techniques and which muscles are recruited based on where your feet are, I wanna show you how you can mimic what The Rock is doing with his back foot, even if you don't have a roller. Come on. Now, you might be wondering, Jordan, why do you have a dirty towel in your hands? Well, it's because it's been in my office for like 6 months. Anyway, I'm gonna get to that in 1 second. I'm gonna show you how you can use this towel to make your Bulgarian split squat feel much better if you don't have a roller. I'm also gonna explain 2 different ways to do it. If you only have access to a bench, I'm gonna show you how you can set your Bulgarian split squat up here. If you have access to a squat rack like this, you can also do it a little bit more like The Rock did, even if you don't have a roller. So first, starting with the bench, it's very simple. When you set up for the Bulgarian split squat, you just put your foot on the bench. The reason I have the towel though, is because a lot of people say when they put their foot on the bench, their foot will cramp. It doesn't really feel good. So what you can do is you can take the towel, roll it up, you put it on the bench, and now from here, you do the exact same thing, and you can go into your Bulgarian split squat, and it feels much better in your foot, and you're probably not gonna get a cramp. You'll also notice it is a little bit more like a roller. Either way, what's really important to remember is, just like The Rock was doing, very little weight on your back foot. So whether you have your foot on the bench with or without a towel, or like I'm about to show you with the squat rack, as little weight as possible on the back foot, all of the weight on the front foot. Now I'm gonna show you how you can set up using a squat rack. So if you have a squat rack that you can use, you can just set up the barbell at a much lower height, and you can essentially do almost exactly what The Rock was doing without having to buy a roller. You can put your foot up on this if you want. If the barbell doesn't feel good on your foot, drape a towel over it, and you can exactly do basically the exact same thing where you do a Bulgarian split squat with your foot on the barbell. And the nice part about this is, unlike a bench or a box or even necessarily the roller, you can change the height based on your own individual needs. I'm a smaller dude, so I will generally go a much lower height, but if you're a little bit taller, I've worked with some basketball players before, their legs gonna be up a little bit higher because they're so tall and their anthropometry is different. So I actually really like the squat rack, and if you have one, especially with a lot of the pins that are very close together, it's gonna be much better for you because you can be much more individualized with it. All right, let's go back in the office. I'm gonna break down The Rock's technique, tell you who it's good for, who it's not good for, which muscles you're targeting, which muscles you're missing. I'm also gonna break down another Bulgarian split squat technique you can use that might be more beneficial for you depending on your goals. All right, let's go check it out. So the most notable thing about The Rock's technique is his very wide stance. Is really what's garnered the most amount of people saying he's doing it wrong. He's not doing it wrong. He actually wrote in his caption a couple things that are very important, notably that he's had knee issues for a very long time. He's got some cranky knees. So having this very long stance is actually less stressful on his knees because his knees won't come so far forward. If you watch me replicate what The Rock is doing, pay attention to my knee relative to my toe. My knee will never come in front of my toe. And this is not me saying knees going in front of your toes is bad. It's not at all. But if you're someone who already has cranky knees, generally speaking, if your knees are going super far in front of your toes, you're putting more stress on your knee joint. And again, I'm not saying don't ever put your knees in front of your toes. I'm saying this might just be good if you're currently experiencing cranky knees. The other thing about this very wide stance is it is better at targeting your glutes than a closer stance. And I'm not saying a closer stance is bad. I actually love a closer stance and I prefer a closer stance. But if your main goal is to target your your glutes rather than your quads, this is a very, very good variation to include within your training. Now, like I said, I personally prefer a bit of a closer stance. Some of the main things that are equal, whether you're doing close stance or wide stance, is your heels stay on the ground the entire time. Your heels should never be coming up off the ground. So whether you're doing a close stance or a wide stance, heels should always be flat against the floor. But with the close stance, I like it better for a number of reasons. It is a little bit more balanced. You obviously target your glutes like a motherfucker. You also target your quads better. I do think that for people who don't have knee pain, I think it will actually build better, stronger, more resilient knees, because you'll notice my toes are going forward over my knees, which is actually really important. And if you look at side by side, a picture of the wide stance versus the close stance, this is very, very important to look at. You're gonna notice in the wide stance, my torso is much more upright. It's more perpendicular to the ground. Whereas in the closer stance, my torso is leaning over forward more. In the closer stance, you can see this actually looks much more like a sprint. If we put up a picture on the screen of a sprinter, you'll see, especially when they're accelerating, they are leaned forward at about a 45-degree angle. So if you want to build strength more closely resembling that which when you're actually sprinting, better for athletic performance, I think a closer stance is the better bet for you. But if you are doing something like The Rock with a wider stance because you want to target your glutes and or because you have knee pain, don't say it's bad. It's actually very good and it could be beneficial. Now, if I had my way, I would program both of these variations at different points in the training process. One time on maybe a more glute-focused specialization phase, and then the narrower stance on a phase where I'm more focused on athletic performance. In the fitness industry, everyone likes to make things about extremes. This isn't about what's right or what's wrong, what's good or what's bad. It's more about they both work. Let's figure out which one is best for you at various times in the training cycle. So those are the two main Bulgarian split squat variations, wide stance and close stance. But there are a bunch of sub variations to each of those that you can use. So I'm gonna just quickly go through a few of them so you can try them on your own. So whether you're doing a wide stance or close stance, you can always do a paused Bulgarian split squat. And that's exactly what it sounds like. You do the movement, but at the very bottom, you pause for about 1 to 3 seconds. You don't need a pause at the top, but right before your back knee hits the floor, you just take a strong pause. You wait there, then you stand up. Again, driving through the heels, through the midfoot, without letting your heel come off the floor, but having this pause at the bottom makes it significantly more difficult and builds starting strength from the bottom position, which is amazing for sprinting. This next variation is called a 1.5 repetition. Basically, you're gonna go all the way down, come halfway up, all the way back down again, and then all the way up. And that counts as 1 full rep. It's absolutely fucking brutal. So you get into your Bulgarian split squat stance, you go all the way down, halfway up, all the way down, and all the way up. And you repeat that all the way down, halfway up, all the way down, all the way up. Now, if you don't like it when your muscles burn, you're definitely not gonna like this one. It's called a constant tension variation. So you get into your Bulgarian split squat technique, and the main thing is you just don't fully lock out at the top position. So you're gonna go down, you're gonna come right back up, and before you lock out, you begin the next repetition. You keep constant tension on the working muscles, the glutes and the quads. You just don't stop moving at all. So you keep that constant tension. It burns like a motherfucker. It's an amazing variation. Now this next variation, you're actually gonna balance on the bosu ball. So you're gonna put the ball on the ground, and I want you to pay attention, because if anyone tells you to do this variation, you unfollow them immediately. You do not balance on the fucking bosu ball doing Bulgarian split squats. Terrible idea. Now the last variation today is gonna be a foot elevated Bulgarian split squat. So the front foot is gonna be elevated, and this is gonna allow you to have a bigger range of motion. I will say, you don't need to do this if you have a very wide stance. If you notice The Rock did this, he had his foot elevated for the very wide stance. It was sort of redundant, it was unnecessary, because he still wasn't increasing his range of motion. You really only need this if you're doing the narrower stance, because then you can get deep enough to actually have this make a difference. So you'll see as I'm doing this, with the narrower stance, my knee is gonna come all the way down past the point of the step, which allows me to have a bigger range of motion. However, if I did the wide stance, you can't really get down that deep anyway. You're already limited, so there's no real need to do that. So for the closer stance, you just have the step a little bit closer to you. You go as low as you can, and you come back up, and you get a bigger range of motion, which can be good for recruiting more motor units, more muscle fibers, which can be great for strength and for muscle growth. Well, that wraps it up for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you don't already. If you've been a subscriber for a while, you know this video looks very different than my previous videos. We're trying some things out. So if you're new or not new, just leave a comment. Let me know if this was helpful or not. I hope it was. And if you want to join my email list, the link is in the description of this video. I send free workouts on a pretty regular basis, so get on that email list. I'll send you some free workouts over time. Have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you soon.